Whoa, I didn't even speak. All I did was breathe. Good evening. I'll call this special town meeting for the town of Sheffield to order. My name's Julie Hannum, your newly elected moderator. I'm pleased to be with you tonight. And if you would please rise if you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. My pleasure to welcome you here tonight. Before we begin our formal meeting, I would probably some people know, not others, but our former moderator, Bruce Person, passed away this weekend, and I would ask we'll have a moment of silence in his memory. Bruce was a moderator for 27 years, from 1989 to 2016, and he would fill in frequently when our next moderator was not available. He was also a sitting constable. He's been a constable for the last 20 years, from 2004 to 24, and actively serving until his passing this weekend. If you're wondering what the heck does a constable do, the constable works to have the town warrant posted so that it's around town and people can find it in various locations. So that was one of his things. So if we could just have a quick moment of silence for Bruce. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the head table. I'll start here on this end. We have our chairwoman, Nadine Haver, for the Board of Selectmen, or that's the Select Board, I guess we are now calling it. Bob Kilmer, Lee Butala, who's still in the honeymoon, being the new Select Board member. We have our town administrator, Rhonda LaBombard, and our legal counsel, Mark Rich. Thank you very much for being here. I want to thank Felicity Joyce, our town clerk, her assistant, Nicole Parker, all the folks that do the check-in, and if we need to do a count, our counters, for setting up logistics for meeting tonight. So a couple of housekeeping items. You noticed when you came in that we have new clickers. We'll get to that in a minute. One of the important pieces is because we don't have the pouch for you to put your orange card, when you would come to speak, please remember to bring that with you, or as I'm going to do, put it in my pocket. You put it in your pocket, as long as I can see it. Otherwise, I might be asking you about that. I think we have a pretty small crowd here tonight, but please stay seated when we're voting, especially if by any chance we need to do a hand vote. We won't be clapping unless there is a total unanimous vote as determined by the moderator. If you wish to speak, we'll have 3 minutes. We'll be doing a demo in a minute. We have the timer now, like the pre-vote timer that Nicole will be running, so you'll be able to see your 3 minutes. If you come to the podium a second time, hopefully that will be for some new information. Remember, at the microphone, you need to state your name and your street address, show your trusty orange card. And then we have our new clicker system is called Meridia Town Vote, and Nicole's going to demo. This time you'll see there's only 2 buttons, a yes and a no. There's no 1 and 2 and all of that. There'll be information on the screen. Nicole, do you want to just have people do that, and then we'll explain what it looks like? Well, this is the test vote. Okay, so test vote. Is everyone ready for the holidays? So you can click yes or no. You have 20 seconds to do that vote. All right, so let's do that, and then we can explain what you're going to be seeing. So that was a pre-vote screen, and now Nicole has opened that. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, it says status is open. She started the timer, so now it's counting the 20 seconds down. So I voted too early, I think. Yeah, so basically you want to make sure you see this screen for each article, and you want to see on the upper right, status open, and you can see the count coming down. Okay, and you'll see the rule, like that one is a majority vote. There we go. Result failed. I guess there's more people who are not ready for holidays. Wow, I'm impressed. Some people are, look at that. But across the top, this is where you can see that it's a majority vote on this particular. There are some that will be 2/3 tonight, and you will be able to see that. The status of the voting is closed. So again, when you're voting, you want to make sure you see status open, and that's when you'll vote. You do have time within that 20 seconds if you want to change your vote from a yes to or no. You can do that as long as the status is open. Anything else we want to add? We've got it. Okay. So the big thing will be, and it'll be for me as well, since this is all new for all of us, is to remember we're voting, and there's the pre-vote screen. So you'll be able to see the actual warrant item or the summary of that. And then when it clicks to this type of screen, that's when the actual voting takes place. I think that's it. So we'll proceed then to Article 1. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds, or any combination thereof, a sum of money for the design, alteration, improvement, reconstruction, rehabilitation, and construction of town-owned buildings and other improvements located at 48 Sheffield Business Park, and all costs incidental and related thereto, or take any other action relative thereto.
Madam Moderator, I move that the town appropriate the sum of $2 million to pay the costs of the design, alteration, improvement, reconstruction, rehabilitation, and construction of the town-owned buildings and other improvement located at 48 Sheffield Business Park, and all costs and incidentals related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow said amount under the pursuant to General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7(1), with any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds and notes therefore.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded, and I will turn the floor to our Select Board Chair for explanation.
Thank you so much for coming out and attending this meeting tonight. Since the last special town meeting, which was you gave authorization to purchase the property at 48 Sheffield Business Park, we have completed the purchase of that property and selected EDM as the designer for both Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the highway project. EDM is a company we have worked with on many other projects in the past, and the board feels is the right company for Sheffield. We have learned that we needed to hire an owner's project manager. For the rest of the evening, I will refer to that as the OPM. Because the cost of the entire project will exceed $1.5 million, we need a project manager. There is currently a request for proposal, will be known as RFP, for the OPM. The proposals were due on September 4th, and the board will review and make decisions based on their experience. We anticipate the cost for the design work and the OPM to be approximately $500,000. This, together with the estimated renovation cost of $1.5 million, is the total of our request tonight of $2 million for Phase 1. This borrowing will be done as needed, with the design and OPM costs being first, and the renovation will follow once it begins. This will be done with short-term bonds that will mature at the end of May 2025. This borrowing, along with the purchase borrowing, when we do Phase 2, this borrowing, along with the purchase borrowing from May, and Phase 2 borrowing will be combined into one bond by August of 2026. As the board has previously explained, this project will consist of two phases. Phase 1 is the design, the manager, and the renovations, and Phase 2 will be to the construction of a second building for vehicle storage, wash bay, salt, and sand shed. We will schedule another special town meeting once Phase 2 is estimated. Please remember we are currently working on the estimated costs for Phase 1 based on the initial study done by Weston and Sampson. Voters approved an article several years ago to fund the cost of the design work for the highway garage. These funds were used for the initial study, and there's approximately $90,000 remaining in that article, which will be used to reduce the borrowing or to be used if the costs come in higher than estimated. The town of Sheffield has always placed maintaining and improving our infrastructure as a priority. The highway garage is more than 60 years old, and now is the time.
The floor is open for questions or discussion.
Sari Hoy, 60 Main Street. I am wondering, because you've talked about the borrowing of money, but it also says raise and appropriate. And I wondered if we are planning on using any ARPA funds for this next stage.
So in the motion, Sari, she read borrow.
Yes.
So the plan is to borrow the money for Phase 1. She also stated that years ago, an article was passed for some highway garage study work to be done, and there's approximately $90,000 left in that account that will be used either to reduce the amount or if the estimate of 1.5 million is slightly higher than what we anticipate.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure if we had any knowledge of where else we can actually access money from accounts that we have or funding some way. But sounds like no at this point.
At this point, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sorry, yes.
Hi, it's Lou Levine, 261 East Main Street. I'm wondering whether the original study that was done applies to the new property and whether more study needs to be done.
So the original study we had done by Weston and Sampson was a very preliminary, can this building be used for a highway garage, and what will it need? And in their best estimate, what would that cost be? So that's what we're using. The new architectural plans will have everything exact, and they will get exact prices from cost estimators.
Other questions? Yes, I see one in the back.
William Kelsey, 397 Clayton Road. I find this very confusing, seeing as the Sheffield Times came out with a price tag with the word approximate estimate. I don't like approximate estimates. I like to know what I'm spending money on. Now I come here tonight and Article 1 is 60 words that says blah, 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 but doesn't say how much the total price is. We're taking this thing in little pieces and chunks. And it's kind of like, I like to know what's up front, and I also would like to see some plans. I've never voted on anything in a town meeting without a presenter of showing what we're paying for and laid out in a way that we can understand. Just coming and asking us to prove $2 million for something that I was under the impression that it was included in the 7.6 million estimated price.
Thank you, Mr. Kelsey, for your question. We did present plans, the estimated drawings, the original plans of the initial evaluation of the property that Weston and Sampson did in March when we asked to borrow the money to purchase the building. We had the plans of what the building looks like now and what it would look like with the renovations that were discussed with Weston and Sampson. We are unable to get the formal blueprints with all of the details that you're asking for without paying the design and the architect to do those plans. And we don't have any money in the budget to meet their estimated expenses. So we had to come to town meeting to request funds for the architect and the project manager. So the board decided that we would also ask for the estimated $1.5 million for the renovation as presented by Weston and Sampson in March. And should there be a cost overrun, we would have the $90,000 from the additional warrant article that's left over from the highway garage study.
Renee Wood, 928 Boardman Street. While I'm not on the select board now, I have been on the board since we started the latest iteration of this highway garage. And we have, as the select board previously, and as the select board is now doing, done extreme due diligence. I think some of you remember we were over on the lot across from the school here, and we found out that that was going to be a horrendous amount of money to build, just even to clear the land and prep the land and build the building. So we bought the property, which will be the subject of Article number 2, and then the Tupper building came up, and that was a bargain. The select board has laid out very clearly every step of this way, including drawings in town hall, a very detailed presentation by Weston and Sampson when we bought, as a town, the Tupper building, and we laid out the renovations. Unfortunately, in today's world, none of us, including architects, will do work without being paid. So that is where we are right now. We have tentative renovation design. We have tentative, I think, possibly very accurate estimates, but they are only estimates. And so I think the board is being very prudent in what they're asking for, and I know they'll be back for more request of money when we go into phase 2. But we need to remember that people all around us are spending $25 million for a new safety building, $32 million. This board is being very fiscally responsible, and I hope that you will join me in voting yes for this.
Crystal Van Duzen, 94 Pike Road West. If we spend only the $2 million, how much are our taxes going to go up to fund this, and over how long of a period of time?
No, I only have what you have for questions on the entire project.
So, Crystal, I didn't bring the cost just for the $2 million. I anticipated someone asking, what's it going to cost when it's all done? So, and I apologize for not having that with me.
That's better, okay.
So we anticipate that if both phases get approved by the voters, that the impact to the tax rate will be about 58 cents per thousand. It will increase the average home about $250 a year.
Okay.
Taking the math from there, the first phase is probably somewhere around 100, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Lee.
Other questions or concerns? All right, the motion is before us. Oh, I didn't see. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Joanne Robinson, 397 Clayton Road. It seems to me that the town has bought 2 pieces of property that were not able to be used for the town garage. Is that up for being sold? Are we going to have any money towards that, towards this $1.5 million?
The second article addresses the land that was purchased just before we learned that this property was available.
So that will be a separate discussion in terms of doing that, with it being a different article. Anyone else? Okay, then this will be our first true vote with our new system. This is the pre-vote screen. Nicole has this ready, and we will open the vote. So we see status open. Please use your clicker. So the motion has passed with a substantial majority, 54 yes, 7 no. Thank you to everyone for voting. On to Article 2. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Select Board to convey in accordance with the provisions of General Law, Chapter 30B, Section 16, all or a portion of the town-owned property located at 1739 Hewen Street, identified as Assessor's Map 8, Block 4, Lot 17, and believed to be described in the deed recorded with the Southern Berkshire Registry of Deeds, Book 1245, page 329, under such terms and conditions as the Select Board deem appropriate, and to authorize the Select Board to enter into all agreements, execute any and all instruments, and take any and all actions as may be deemed necessary or appropriate to effectuate the foregoing purpose or take any other action relative thereto.
Ms. Moderator, I move to authorize the Select Board to convey in accordance with the provisions of General Law, Chapter 30B, Section 16, all of the town-owned property located at 1739 Hewen Street, Assessor's Map 8, Block 4, Lot 17, and described in the deed recorded with the Southern Berkshire District Registry of Deeds, Book 1245, page 329, under such terms and conditions as the Select Board deem appropriate, and to authorize the Select Board to enter into all agreements, execute and any and all instruments, and take any and all actions as be necessary or appropriate to officiate the foregoing purpose.
So the motion's been made and seconded, and again, I welcome our Select Board Chair to the podium.
So in Article 2, the Select Board is requesting permission to sell the land at 1739 Hewen Street, which was the land originally purchased for the highway garage before the building at 48 Sheffield Business Park became available to us. State law requires the voters' permission to buy and sell land. The proceeds of the sale will be put into an account called Proceeds from the Sale of Land. These funds may be used for any purpose and will require voter approval before use. The land was purchased using ARPA funds. The board feels that some of the funds coming back through the sale of the land should be used for the same purpose.
Floor is open.
Renee Wood, 928 Boardman Street. I oppose this measure for several reasons and ask you to do the same. First of all, this land was purchased with ARPA funds. I believe it was $425. All of the ARPA funds, I believe, have to be allocated by December of this year, and I know Mark Rich will correct me if I'm wrong, and have to be used by December of 26. So that gives very little time for the Board of Selectmen to effectuate this sale, which it says in our handout will be done by sealed bid. I do not know, because they don't say, if the select board is going to start with the opening price of whatever it was that was paid for it, $420-some thousand, or whether the sealed bid could in fact buy this land for less. So that is one objection. The second objection I have is that when we got ARPA funds, the number one thing people said they wanted to have done with ARPA funds is affordable housing. This land, even though it's in the commercial district, is ideal for affordable housing, which, let's be honest, it's every one of us what we could afford, what our kids could afford. So I see no reason to sell this land in a rush, and I think we should save it for affordable housing and see what develops. The Housing Committee and BRPC have done excellent work to take what has been a checklist of things to do and actually begin to develop a very good plan for affordable workforce housing. There is very little town land that the town owns that is suitable for that purpose. This parcel, over 4 acres, would provide at least 4, possibly more, homes or units that could be used for your kids, my wannabes that want to come here. So I really ask you to think about this seriously. This land isn't going away. We can take this measure up in another couple of years and see what develops. But I'm very concerned about the price that we might get for this. I don't want it to be a loss, and I don't see any reason to hurry on this land. In fact, one of the selectmen, not me, but even Nadine, said at one point when we were buying this, that if we didn't use it for the garage, we could possibly use it for affordable housing. So please vote with me and vote this down. Thank you.
So yes, it was ARPA funds that was used to purchase this property at $225,000. The price that the selectmen will start the bid at will include that price, plus the cost of the removal of the building that was on that property, which contained asbestos. So I'm assuming that the select board, they haven't voted it yet, but it's my assumption that they'll start somewhere around $300,000 would be the low bid for that, and that would recoup all of the town's money. The other thing is, the sale doesn't have to go through before ARPA has to be declared, because this money cannot go back into ARPA. It will go into proceeds from the sale of land. So the selectmen are not under constraints trying to decide what to do with the money. The other thing is, the board has been talking about alternative options for housing. It is a topic that they've been discussing. They understand the importance of housing. They just felt that it was best to possibly sell this land, recoup some of the costs for the taxpayers, and find alternative properties for housing.
Pat?
Pat Levine, 261, is this on? 261 East Main Street. I would like to comment that I think not playing cards we don't need to play in terms of selling the property until we in fact have a broader picture of what the options are and what other property might be available and other options in terms of swapping or who knows what. But I think the idea of hanging on to this, the importance of having a working piece of property that the Housing Commission could look at, that BRPC helping, as has been stated, is extremely important, and not jumping into selling it at this point.
Thank you. Renee?
Renee Wood again, may I just ask for a clarification? Rhonda, how much did we pay for this land?
I'm sorry, what?
How much did the taxpayers pay for this land?
$225,000.
All right, I'm mistaken. I apologize for that. To date, there has been no money from ARPA put in to housing. It has been requested of this select board several times. I believe one member of the select board does not feel that the town should be in the business of housing, even though the state just committed $5.4 billion in a bond. I'm not sure that I have seen any intention by the select board, even though they are meeting with the Housing Commission on the 16th to put aside any money for affordable workforce housing, which again was the #1 request by residents when we held 2 public hearings on this matter when we did receive ARPA funds. I think this investment of $200 and some is something that can be set aside and held to see, as Pat Levine just said, what's going to shake out in the next period of time. So again, I do ask you to, this is somewhat free money since it came from ARPA, but I do ask you to vote no on this.
Julie?
Nadine Haver?
I would just like to make a comment that the board does have a meeting with the Housing Commission. The board does have some other suggestions that we'd like to make to the Housing Commission. We are not against affordable housing, but my concern of assigning specific funds to ARPA speak exactly to what Renee said, and that is that the money has to be spent by December of 2026. And if there isn't a project already in the running for construction, spending those monies by 2026 could be a problem.
Please pass down to our town administrator.
I have this one right here, Julie.
Oh, okay, very good.
I was going to say exactly what Renee just said. If there's not a project to use the money on by the time that we have to spend the ARPA funds, then that money will be lost. If some of these funds from proceeds from sale of land can sit in account forever until the board decides to spend it, there certainly would be some funds that could be designated in that account that the board has discussed before, they just haven't made any formal decisions. So it's not like there's no money left for affordable housing. It's a better option, I believe, to have it in an account that you can use whenever and not have to use it by a certain date.
Thank you. Kathy.
Kathy Orlando, Human Street. So in talking with housing organizations, the thing that they always say is the biggest hurdle to doing housing in the Southern Berkshires, including in Sheffield, is the cost of land or the cost of a house. And that when a town or an organization is able to provide the land or a building to be renovated, that is a great way to be able to bring one of those housing organizations like Construct, like Habitat for Humanity, like the Community Land Trust into the partnership. Because Sheffield, as a small town, as the select board has said many times, and as we all talked about when we were doing the housing production plan, is that we as a town don't want to have to do the housing. So what that means is we need to do it in partnership with a housing organization. And being able to say, we have this piece of land, which, and do an RFP to say, what would you do if you had this? That is a fantastic way to be able to kickstart something, and it can be done quickly because we already own the land. The town of Beckett, they use their community preservation funds. They've given $25,000 twice to Construct, and Construct has used that and done 2 houses for them that are over $200,000 value each. That kind of leverage is what we're talking about being able to do with town land. This 4 acres is highly buildable. Since the town owns it, it's not going to stay as agricultural land. If it's going to get developed for housing or something else, let's do something that's going to address the serious need that we all know is here for housing for folks who are in that gap. We can't afford what's here. The town-owned land, the other land that the housing production plan and the implementation study looked at, there are only 2 other pieces that the town owned that could possibly be possible sites. The one across from the school that had been the highway department, because it doesn't have as much issues, because it could just be a duplex or something of that sort, so you don't have the issues related to all of the storage and the chemicals and the stuff for a highway department. The other is a 1-acre piece that is at the junction of Bears Den and Berkshire School Road, which again is just 1 acre, small, don't know if it's possible, but to rush into selling this when it can be such a great tool to leverage housing here seems like it is unwise. So I would also urge us all to say no to this.
Selectman Kilmer, please.
Now, my thoughts are, those are properties that we have talked about using for possible housing. This piece of property is commercial in design. It is very interesting as it backs up to the business park. We do not have a lot of commercial land in Sheffield or Ashley Falls that is not environmentally sensitive. This land probably should go back to something more in the line of business or commercial than it should be in affordable housing. I believe that we don't need the taxpayers putting more and more on top of what we already have. This had a purpose for the purchase. Town folk agreed to that purpose and to use ARPA money. So this piece of property was purchased under the assumption it was going to be used for the highway garage. Therefore, I think it should be sold and the money and proceeds go back to funding the highway garage.
Lou.
Yes, Lou Levine, 261 East Main Street. I'm just a little bit confused. Can somebody explain to me how the money will be lost if we don't do something? I'm just not understanding that.
With the ARPA funding, which is the American Rescue Plan Act funds that came from the federal government during COVID, we had a certain time that we had to designate the use for every penny of the ARPA. And then we have, beyond that, we have a certain time that we have to spend it. If you designated it housing, for instance, and you weren't able to come up with a plan or implement a plan and spend the money during the time that we were allotted, it's my belief that the money will have to go back to the federal government. Where if it's sitting in an account, proceeds from sale of land, we have that money can sit there forever, years and years, until you, the voters, decide how you want to spend that.
Okay, so now I understand that. Now I can ask my second question, if I may. Why isn't this money being designated to pay for part of the project which we just voted for?
So left in ARPA, the ARPA funds for the town, excluding this sale of this property because that money's already been used, is approximately $266,000. It's not out of the question that the board could designate some of that towards this project. They haven't made their final decision on where the ARPA funds are designated.
So that is exactly my question. You're asking us to borrow money,
yes,
and not use money which we've already designated for exactly the same project.
No, we haven't designated that.
No, we bought this property to build the garage. And now, if we're going to sell the property, why isn't that money going back into that thing by designation?
We have no mechanism, Lee, to put this back into, I'm sorry, Lou. We have no mechanism to put it back into ARPA. We can't do that. When we sell a piece of property, it has to go into the proceeds from sale of land and then voted on again when voters decide to use that money. It would be nice if we could say, we spent this money out of ARPA, let's put it back into ARPA, and then we can designate it again. Unfortunately, our hands are tied, and we can't do that.
I guess, but I'm not asking you to put it back into ARPA. I'm asking you to put it into this fund.
Lou, nor can it go into the garage fund itself. It has to go into this, it's just a matter of protocol of where it has to go back as a line item.
Yeah, thank you. If I may just to try to clarify further, as Ron has been explaining, the money was used to purchase the property. When you sell property, unfortunately, Mass law requires that proceeds from the sale of property have to go into a specific account designated as proceeds from the sale of land. Ultimately, that money can be appropriated out by vote at town meeting again, but it can't happen automatically. So it's not a situation where you sell this property, the money would just automatically be designated back to the project. Because of the functioning of this statute, it has to go first into this account, and then you, the voters, could vote it back out for any purpose for which the town could borrow money, which would be consistent with the project. But there's an extra step here, and so we can't take that step until we have that money come back into this account. It's just you consider it like a quirk of the statute. You have that extra step that you have to take.
And that means that we could not today have said that when that money comes back to the...
No, you can't appropriate funds you don't have yet. So you can authorize the sale. When that money comes in, then it could be appropriated out. You can't essentially precondition the use of that money. It would come back to town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
To respond in kind, it could certainly be used for phase 2 of this project or for something like affordable housing. The town will make that decision.
Yeah.
Thank you. Renee, is this new information?
Yes, I think it is.
Thank you.
So I guess this is more directed to Attorney Rich. We purchased that land out of ARPA funds. Therefore, that money has been allocated and that money has been spent. So we have met the qualifications of ARPA on that purchase, correct?
Yes.
So there is no ARPA reason to sell this land. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that is correct. So it is the selectmen's desire to sell this land that is bringing the issue. Now, on a second measure, I believe Lou asked how much money, or Rhonda said somewhere along the line, that there's about $263,000 left in unauthorized ARPA funds that have to be authorized by December of 24 and spent by December of 26.
Correct.
So that $263,000 of unexpended ARPA funds could be brought to town meeting in May, or, could be designated, since it is the select board. I'm just thinking out loud here. It could be designated by the select board before December of this 31st of this year to be used for the highway garage, correct?
Yes, it could.
Okay, so that's where your $263,000 comes from. Therefore, since the sale of the land to get money to go into a fund that could be used future purposes, and the sale of property is really potentially not needed. And the fact that that land has sat there for how many decades unsold, and how much land is already on Route 7, and that the commercial, I think that's the general business district, is zoned for housing. Again, I think there is no reason for selling this property.
Sari Hoy, 60 Main Street. I would urge us to hold on to that land. I don't see the urgency to sell it. If that money would then go into another account, I think that we should take more time to look into how that land can be used for housing and if it makes sense. And as far as it costing more taxes, the whole point of what Kathy was saying is that by bringing in other organizations such as Habitat for Humanity or Construct, they are well versed in leveraging state money and other grants to help to build things like that. So I agree with Renee that you have a $260,000 left that you could appropriate for the garage. You could hold on to this land. do some more research, have your meeting and multiple meetings, hopefully, with the Housing Commission to discuss what the opportunities are, either on this land or elsewhere. And if we use this land for housing, great. And if we use the money from selling it for housing, great. But Sheffield needs housing that local people and young people who are not making massive amounts of money can afford. Thank you.
Kathy?
So I understand the concern about this being a commercial zone, but it is also, residential is allowed within there, and to find another property in that price range that could host houses like that in Sheffield, I mean, this is an extraordinarily rare opportunity, which was why the town voted to do this, because to be able to find a property for that price was unheard of. So again, especially because town council said that there's no way to be able to say that the sale of this property, the money from the sale of this property could be designated, as going to housing, so that you can't say, okay, well, if you're not going to do this, you'll have that. Again, I would suggest that we say no tonight and hold off, do the study, send out an RFP, be able to get a sense of what could partners do for us, and then be able to come back when we have more information and potentially a way of being able to say, if housing isn't going to go here, here's how we make sure the funds are there to go someplace else. But again, it is unheard of to have a piece of property so easily developable for that amount of money, and that is an incredible gift towards having housing in Sheffield.
Thank you. Mr. Kelsey?
You have to be in your late 70s, born and raised here, and can't find a place to live. Because the cityites have come up here and raised the prices on everything so that a local person, we spent 4 months turning every stone, calling every call we could call, within Alfred, all over Great Barrington, all the way up to Pittsfield, looking for a place for a person that was born and raised here, right in Sheffield. So this word plan, I want to choke on that, because we plan and we plan and we plan. And all I hear is, we're studying this, we're studying this. But when you're 78 years old and born and raised here, and you're priced out of the housing market of the very place that you were born into, went to school here, spent your whole life here, and you can't live here because we're planning, we're trying to get housing, we're trying these things, but there's no shovels in the ground. I like to see shovels in the ground. Cement trucks pull up to the hole, pour the foundation, and get this thing moving forward, because I go to the Nature Conservancy meetings and I hear all the 1,200 acres and thousands of acres we're saving. But every one of those people in the audience is my age. And in 25 years, those people will all be dead. And then what happens to all that open space? Because there's nobody left to live here, because they can't afford to live here.
Mr. Kelsey, do you have a comment directly related to this purchase or not? Or perhaps you're finished at this point?
Well, it's another piece of land that the town owns. So someplace, somewhere, somebody has to give. Somebody has to let something develop and happen. And you can't do that. Once you sell it, it goes back to commercial. Sure, commercial is I understand commercial property is limited, but we keep talking about planning for housing. Ask me when I'm 78 years old where I can't find a place to live.
Is there anyone else? Lee Butala, please.
Thank you for your comment, and I think we are all committed to the idea of everyone being able to live on in town. As a new member of the Select Board, I think some of the decision of putting this in front of us today was giving the people, because this is how our town government works, a decision that's theirs to make on this land. Whether or not they would like to keep the land in our hand, or whether they felt that we purchased it with one idea in mind, and therefore they might want to go back to funding that. I don't think that there was an aggression on any part, or at least on my own part in this decision-making process, other than really trying to believe this decision should go in front of the people of the town of Sheffield. And with that said, I believe you have something to say as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I think just for a little bit of clarification, the article for you would authorize the sale of this property, but it doesn't specify how that property or what the purpose of the property sale would be. So I've heard discussion about partnering with Habitat for Humanity or other entities that do affordable housing. I think it's important to note that in order for that to happen, there'd have to be a mechanism to dispose of the property to an entity such as that. So this doesn't take that off the table. That's something that could be, and I think would be considered by the Select Board in establishing a request for proposals for the acquisition of the property. As you see, there's a reference to Chapter 30B, Section 16. That's the statute that governs the acquisition and disposition of property. It requires an RFP be issued by the town, and in that RFP, the town, through the Select Board, would specify what uses could be made of that property, and that would determine who would be an applicable proposer for the use of the property. So, and again, there's also no timeline. I know that a lot of discussion has been undertaken with respect to timeline. Once the authorization is given, it's authorization, not obligation, meaning that the Select Board could determine over time how to do this disposition, what to include in the RFP. If the proposals are not adequate, then the Select Board could turn them down, and the town would continue to hold on to the property. Keeping in mind, of course, there are certain carrying costs for holding on to this property. So this authorization would really just be the beginning of a process. The Select Board, through a public process, would determine how to structure an RFP and what uses would be made of that property through its sale. So it doesn't foreclose the possibility of other uses, including for housing purposes.
Kathy, is this new information?
Yeah, this is actually a question, because my understanding is the way that this is worded is it's a sealed bid so that the housing partner would have to be buying it. And the way that towns working with housing organizations do that partnering, the way towns don't have to put up additional, all of that is by providing the land. So in talking with those partner organizations, the idea wouldn't be to say how much are you going to pay for it, because there's no way that they're going to be able to outbid other entities. This is a, look, we have this land, this 4 acres, send us an RFP for how you would help us do this, but it wouldn't be asking them to buy the land, because the value of it is saying, we already own the land. How would you do it? And then, yes, there would have to be coming back to a future town meeting to say, here is how we want to do the disposition, but it wouldn't be them buying the land.
Well, to clarify, because that's not entirely correct. The RFP process is not, as you say, a sealed bid. It's a request for proposals process. It's not necessarily price-based. Chapter 30B, Section 16 is a little more open than that. It allows the town to impose restrictions and conditions on the disposition of the property, and then to determine what proposal is in the best interest of the town. The proposal could be for $1 and for this particular use, and that will be acceptable. So it's not a situation where it's just the money. When we talk about sealed bids and you come in and the highest price wins, that's not 30B-16. 30B-16 gives you a lot more flexibility. And so in many situations, I've dealt with many projects where Habitat has been involved, other entities have been involved to develop property for housing, and we go through a Chapter 30B, Section 16 process, because that's what the statute requires, but it would allow the Select Board to impose conditions such as giving preference to affordable housing or giving preference to a commercial development, whatever is ultimately determined to be appropriate, and that's something the board would discuss at a properly posted open meeting, and ultimately that's what would govern, but it's not a sealed bid in the sense of top dollar.
So could something phrased that way to be able, so that everybody who was voting on it knew how it was going, what those parameters were going to be, could something like that be phrased for a subsequent town meeting to facilitate such a thing?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be a future town meeting, because what you're authorizing now is for the select board to dispose of the property. I think the select board is hearing the input and would have to consider how to address that. But once this is voted, the disposition can move forward through the RFP process. And the RFP itself would contain the conditions as determined, and it will be the select board that would determine those conditions.
But there's no way to be able today, in a vote, condition it so that it would need to go that way.
Well, at this point, the way it's framed right now, it's framed broadly. And ultimately, it's town meeting authorizes the disposition. The select board, as the executive body, determines what the parameters are within that Chapter 30B, Section 16 request for proposals process.
So could there be a way to amend what's there today so that it would narrow the parameters?
Well, again, the purpose of town meeting is to authorize the disposition. The select board, as the executive body, determines how to undertake that disposition based upon this authorization.
But there's nothing that says it has to go in any other way.
Right.
It could be used for absolutely anything.
That is correct. But I think the comments are being heard, and it would be a public process in terms of the board determining how to make those restrictions.
I would still suggest that it would be better to say no tonight.
I just want to clarify, too, with the new software, you see the words of the motion, and we've discussed the concept of sealed bid. That phrase is not in this motion. I just wanted to point that out, even though it did come up in conversation. Yes, sir. Mr. Dumont.
Peter Dumont, 94 Pike Road West. I'm mixed on all of this. I understand the need for affordable housing. I understand the need for commercial property, too. I don't like the idea of sealed bid, but you just pointed that out. If the property ends up getting sold, and I think they should be listed just like any other business in town with a high price tag and see what you get. And I don't think we have enough information to legally vote on this tonight to get a good, clear understanding. So I think it should be tabled, and I'm voting no.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak at the microphone?
I call the motion.
Motion's been made to call the question. So we'll use our colored cards. All in favor of calling the question?
Thank you.
Hands down. Those opposed? That is a unanimous vote. No one, don't always see that. It is unanimous. So now we will vote on the motion as stated. You see it on the top of the motion. Here is our ready to vote view. Nicole, you can open the status. All right, if you will please use your clickers and vote on Article 2. The vote is 24 yes, 41 no. The motion has failed by substantial majority. On to Article 3. To see if the town will vote to amend the general bylaws by adding Section 55.3 to Chapter 55, Treasurer-Collector, as written in the warrant. And I wonder if we have someone, oh, go ahead.
I move to amend the general bylaws by adding Section 55.3 to Chapter 55, Treasurer-Collector, as written in the warrant in accordance with MGL C60, Section 62A, with the following amendments. 1, in Section C1, the language 5 be deleted from the first line and be replaced with the language 10. 2, in Section C2, the language of 50% be deleted from the first line. And 3, in Section C3, the language 25% be deleted from the second line and be replaced with the language 10%.
Second.
The motion is made and seconded, and do we need to repeat the three adjustments? So on your warrant sheet, under C, number 1, the 5 years changes to 10 years. In C2, they've totally deleted of 50%. And in section C3, the 25% was reduced to 10%. And perhaps we have someone from the head table that would like to explain or clarify what's happening here.
Thank you. I can do that, Madam Moderator. So you may recall previously town meeting had actually approved a similar bylaw amendment, and the Attorney General raised issues about some of the discretion that was included in the town's bylaw. I think we have a little bit of a difference of opinion, but ultimately the Attorney General makes the rules and we follow them. So this is a more strictly worded bylaw amendment that allows for these kinds of payment agreements. The reason we have these 3 amendments at this late date is that coming up in November, based upon the passage of the State Budget Act and additional provisions that were included in the Budget Act, the legislature has seen fit to amend the provisions of Chapter 60, Section 62A to kind of give a little more flexibility to these agreements. So instead of the agreement being limited to a 5-year period, it could now be up to a 10-year period. And the requirement for the 50% waiver of interest accrued up to 50%, that's been eliminated so that all interest would be waived. And the 25% with respect to a down payment on these agreements has now been reduced to 10%. So these 3 amendments are specifically in line with what the legislature did in amending Chapter 60, Section 62A. It makes this agreement consistent with the statutory process. So it's not, it may look like we're suddenly playing with numbers at the last minute, but it happens to be that the legislature, in addressing certain statutory issues and also certain constitutional issues having to do with tax title process, has made these amendments to make these agreements a little more user friendly, so to speak.
Any questions or discussion points? Seeing none, then I will call the question. Nicole will prepare the voting ballot. And you'll notice it's just a simple majority, and let the voting begin. The motion passes by a substantial majority, 58-1. On to our last article, number 4. To see if the town will vote, first, to accept and confirm the layout of County Road as a public town way, and 2, to authorize the Select Board to acquire by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise the fee in and to and/or permanent temporary easements in certain parcels of land adjacent, contiguous to, or near County Road, all as printed in the warrant.
Madam Moderator, I move to accept and confirm the layout of County Road as a public town way and to authorize the Select Board to acquire by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise the fee in and to and/or permanent and temporary easements in certain parcels of land adjacent, contiguous to, or near County Road, all as written in the warrant.
The motion has been made and seconded.
Mark Pichetti, 1260 County Road. So I'm wondering, how much of this are you actually planning to take or do there? It's my understanding that County Road is already 66 foot wide, much wider than any other road in town. And so the town already has a 66-foot swath up through there. And so I'm just wondering, how much more do you need?
I'm not sure that we need any property, Mark. The easements would be more for utility pole locations or utility wires going over the property. The state is going to pay for the construction on this bridge, but it's the town responsibility to give them the permanent easements, which may be where a utility pole is located, or a temporary easement, which may be where they have cleared to do the work, and they will put it back to its original condition. But we have to have those easements in order for the state to do the project.
Okay, so you're not permanently taking anybody's land?
We are not. We are not.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, for those not familiar with County Road, this has to do with bridge, completing a bridge project.
It's the bridge that's restricted, just as you start up the bottom of the hill. It has finally made it to the top of the state's list, which means that it still might not get done until 2026 or 27, but we have to get all of this work done before they will begin construction.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Nicole will prepare our vote. And please open the status. So please vote with your clickers on Article number 4. Article 4 has passed by a substantial majority, 55 yes, 2 no. All right, so as we prepare to adjourn the meeting, do remember with our new clickers, you are assigned a number on a clicker. Someone from the town clerk's office will chase you if you don't turn in your clicker. So please do see our staff on your way out and return that. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to dissolve this special town meeting.
So moved.
And second? Seconded. I declare this meeting dissolved. We are adjourned.